It's now my pleasure to introduce Paige Strudwick from University of Technology, Sydney, who's going to talk about the Coral Nurture Program, a collaborative approach to coral propagation and outplanting on the Great Barrier Reef. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone, so my name is Paige, I'm from the University of Technology, Sydney, and I'm representing Coral Nurture Program today, talking about our collaborative approach to site stewardship on the Great Barrier Reef. First, I would just like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land and sea country that we work on and where we're gathered today. And I would like to acknowledge them as the first custodians of language, culture and knowledge, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I'm going to try not to step on too many of Lorna's toes, as she did present yesterday on Coral Nurture Program as well, but firstly, I'll introduce just who we are. So sorry if you did attend her talk, might be a bit of an echo, but here we go anyway. So we're researchers from the Future Reefs research group at the University of Technology, Sydney, within the Climate Change Cluster. And then we are 6 tourism operators from the Cairns and Port Douglas region. So we have Wavelength and Sail Away up in Port Douglas, and then Down Under, Cruise and Dive, Passions of Paradise, Ocean Freedom and Quicksilver down here in Cairns. And then we also have Red Cat, Ocean Rafting and Kiana down in the Whitsundays. So we were established in 2019 by Dr. Emma Camp, Professor David Suggett, John Edmondson of Wavelength and Lorna. And we were born out of a necessity for researchers to be able to get to site to conduct their studies, but also for stakeholders and tourism operators who wanted to conduct additional site stewardship after the 16-17 bleaching event. So what we do is we use these intermediate coral nurseries to increase biomass of corals prior to outplanting, and then we put these directly onto the reef at bare patches. And this intermediate nursery phase is really important for us because we have shown that we can increase biomass faster than if we just directly outplant onto the reef. So here's just another example of how we can fast-track natural recovery. By the outplanting of a bare bommy within 2 years, we're able to significantly increase that coral cover faster than just with natural recovery alone. So we have a reciprocal research design, so we're research-led and community-led. So our research feeds into the practice, but also our stakeholders and tourism operators help us direct that research, highlighting the gaps in the knowledge that they would really like to see filled so that we can have the most impact and continually optimise our outcomes. We've been working with an evolving phased model. So we had our initial proof of concept, and this has just led us to expanding capacity, research topics, and then operators and sites. So the first few phases were really local scale and established on just fine-tuning these practices. So how can we streamline permitting? How do we get these methods in place? Are there people that even want to be involved? How do we work as a network to do this? Do nurseries have a role in the implementation of this stewardship? We developed a code of conduct to ensure that everyone was working from the same page and that operators' values aligned with the practices. And then we also developed robust monitoring and reporting to ensure we had a really significant data set that we could work from and evolve. And all of this has been done with science feeding into it. And within the first few phases, we were really more so focused on the socio-economic and ecological learnings rather than the pure science and ecological outcomes. Although that has fed into our publication portfolio. So this is just a snippet of the work that we've been doing over the past 6 months, but we've been able to focus on how our practices impact individual corals, how they impact the reef, but also how this model has evolved, how the cost analysis or cost efficiency varies, and then also some more pure science stuff where we've looked at initiating phenotyping for stock selection, looking at how coral-associated bacterial communities change with our processes as well. So I'd just like to highlight, I'm not going to go too much into the detail of the results of this study, but Rachel's publication this year was only made possible by the fact that we work with this network of operators who have incredible attention to detail and were on board every step of the way with our reporting process. So we were able to track and monitor every coral that has been planted, understanding the amount of divers and time underwater that went into these operations. And that allowed us to generate this really comprehensive understanding of how costs can vary with different operators and different operations. So as I mentioned, we're now transitioning into our fourth phase. So we've taken time to clarify our future directions and priorities, and we're moving towards implementing them. But it's just worth mentioning that our Whitsundays operations are still in the earlier phases of this evolution as they were initiated in 2022. So we're still sort of learning what does and doesn't work with the tourism industry that's slightly different to the one up here in Cairns and Port Douglas. So this is, we've taken stock and we've been able to distill and reflect on our current operations and how they fit into our three-pillar approach. So our first pillar encompasses our optimization of the coral husbandry. So how can we optimize site-specific practices of propagation and outplanting? And then pillar 2 encompasses our aims to boost site resilience with adaptive stock selection. So how can we pick winners, or how can we augment resilience of the reefs from our activities naturally or artificially? And then pillar 3 represents the integration of all of this into practice. So this has resulted in, since 2018, the application by local site stewards. And it's resulted in this continuous evolution by informing the research, but also to improve our techniques, just so we can continually optimize our outcomes. So not only are we adapting practices with this approach, but we're also sharing our learning. So a lot of the questions we're asking are applicable to restoration efforts globally. So that is a really important part of our approach. And then, of course, we don't see Coral Nurture Program as the only people to be feeding into these pillars. There are a lot of people in the room that are pioneering research in these different areas as well. So all of this can be fed into with collaborations. So briefly, we've been able to plant over 100,000 corals. We have activity at over 30 different sites. And of course, with a focus on increasing resilience, we aim to use a lot of different coral species. So we've had quite a high diversity on our nurseries, and that have been outplanted. So on the topic of ecological resilience, we've operated in the past with the idea that if we can boost abundance of corals, we can increase or maintain the biodiversity at sites, and hoping that we can capture natural variation in resilience. So hopefully we get some winners in the activities there. But with the mounting stresses that coral reefs are facing, we understand that we need to focus more on our adaptive stock selection. So instead of just using fragments of opportunity, if we can target to use parent colonies that are the winners, if we can figure out a way to select them, that will be most valuable moving forwards. So with our transition into that fourth phase is what we've been really focused on in the past 6 to 8 months. So before the summer, we took the opportunity to reflect on how we could maximise our lessons learned if there was a thermal stress event, hoping that it wouldn't happen, but if it would, that we would learn as much as we could from it and improve moving forwards. So we were able to set up a range of experiments, and one of them I'm just going to touch on briefly. So with the idea of selecting winners, we selected over 50 different parent colonies of 3 different coral species, and we chose these based on a few different characteristics. So we looked at colour morph, size of the colony, depth, and the microhabitat that they were in, with the idea that if a coral colony is a big enough size, it might have survived a previous bleaching event, so may have some inherent resilience. And these are all traits that different restoration efforts are using to select their supercorals or their more tolerant corals. So we're seeing if that would work with our approaches here on the Great Barrier Reef. So in the process of selecting our parent colonies, we used a piece of equipment developed by UTS, which conducted a rapid heat stress assay. So we have a general idea of what the thermal tolerance of our genotypes might be. And then over summer, we've monitored these corals on our nurseries and on the reef, and in outplanting plots to see how they go, and basically cross-reference that back to the pre-summer tests that we did. So I don't have a lot of results yet. I still have been collecting a lot of data over the past 3 months, as you can imagine, but just quickly I'll show you the variation that we've seen in some responses. So on the top there you've got an Acropora, and this is the same genotype throughout the summer. You can see that it's grown really nicely on the nurseries and it hasn't exhibited any paling or signs of stress. However, on the bottom there we've got a Posilopora, and that was the only one of approximately 18 genotypes that exhibited paling. And it exhibited paling across all of the nurseries that we put them on. So that's quite interesting. We do have a variation in responses. We also had a variation in responses on the reef. So I'm going to be working to see if we can distill all of this information into a sort of recipe, so we can develop a tool to give to practitioners to select those more tolerant parents. Not necessarily expecting that I'll be able to figure that out with just one experiment, but hoping that we can also just identify some avenues for future research where we can really fine-tune these practices. So just a huge thank you to all of our collaborators, everyone in the Future Reefs team, and lots of people I didn't write on there too. I'm really sorry if I missed you. But it's been, a great pleasure to work with all of you guys throughout my PhD and now into my postdoc. So I'm really grateful and look forward to the future. Thank you.
Any questions in the room or any questions online? Paige, I'm sure there are questions. People will probably grab you in at lunch for more of a talk about your work. I'd like to now invite